It began in the darkest region of the galaxy, a place so empty and forgotten that even ancient star maps marked it only with blank spaces and warning symbols. A region so deep and so cold that even light seemed afraid to enter it, slowing down as if the darkness swallowed it whole, and inside that endless void drifted a small alien civilian ship, a fragile, trembling vessel no bigger than a human shuttle. Its engines dead, its power fading, its crew exhausted beyond belief after weeks of hopeless wandering. Their food was nearly gone, their oxygen filters were failing, and their distress signals had been echoing through deep space every hour since the 4th week, reaching every direction, hoping for anyone, anything, any passing fleet or patrol ship to hear them. But no one answered. No empire, no alliance, no trade convoy, not even a pirate crew. The galaxy had moved on without them, unaware or uncaring that a lost ship was dying slowly in the silent dark. Inside the cramped corridors of the alien vessel, emergency lights flickered weakly, casting dim red shadows across the walls like slow heartbeat pulses, each flicker a reminder that time was running out. Families huddled together, children shivering as the temperature dropped each day, parents whispering soft lies trying to comfort them. Help is coming. Someone will find us. Even though deep down they no longer believed it. The captain of the ship, an elderly alien whose hands shook each time he touched the control panel, stared at the blank comms screen again and again, hoping to see even a single blinking response message. But the display stayed empty, silent, cold. Outside the hull, space remained still, quiet, but not peaceful. The darkness felt alive, watching, breathing, waiting. And soon the crew began hearing it too. Not through the comm system, not through sensors, but through the metal of the ship itself. Strange whispers, soft scraping sounds, echoes of something moving between the dead stars, something ancient and hungry. Children cried when they heard it. The adults pretended not to. But each passing day, the whispers grew louder, clearer, like claws scratching along the hull, circling, testing, hunting. Rumors spread among the survivors, tales of void creatures that traveled between the empty regions, feeding on stranded ships, draining life from anything that drifted too long into the dark. One mechanic swore he saw shadows sliding past the windows even though no stars were visible. A young mother claimed she heard a voice calling her name from outside the ship, a voice that sounded like someone she lost years ago. Others said the darkness itself moved. Fear spread. Panic rose. Hope died slowly, quietly. And then, one by one, the emergency lights across the ship began shutting off for good, each section falling into deeper darkness until only a few remained, flickering like dying candles. The oxygen pumps slowed, making breathing painful. The temperature dropped so low that frost formed on control panels. The survivors huddled together with blankets and shaking hands, listening to the whispers outside as they waited for the end. Then, without warning, the ship's long-range scanner beeped. A weak, broken sound that made everyone freeze. Something was approaching. Something massive. Something moving incredibly fast through the dark, heading straight toward them with silent precision. The crew rushed to the scanner display, watching the single dot on the screen grow larger each second. Too large to be a small ship, too fast to be drifting debris, too silent to be anything natural. The old captain placed a trembling hand on the console as dread spread through the room like cold fire. "It found us," someone whispered. Children screamed softly. Adults closed their eyes, preparing for death. They believed this was the creature they feared, the thing that hunted lost vessels. The dot came closer, and closer, and closer, until suddenly the scanner recalibrated. The image sharpened, the silhouette updated, and everything changed. The shape was not warped, misshapen, monstrous, or organic. It had edges, structure, purpose. It wasn't a beast. It wasn't a pirate. It wasn't any empire's warship. It was something far larger. A ship so massive it filled the entire screen, dwarfing their tiny vessel like a mountain overshadowing a pebble. A ship built with angles and armor they had never seen before, glowing faintly with power far beyond anything they understood. A ship that moved silently, smoothly, confidently. like it belonged in the dark more than light ever did. A human warship. The alien crew stared in shock, disbelief, and confusion. Humans? Out here? In the deepest part of the void? Why? How? But they had no time to think because the moment they sent one last desperate cry for help. A weak, sputtering signal barely audible, almost lost in static. The giant warship stopped instantly, engines halting with absolute precision, as if pausing mid-breath. And then something happened the alien crew never expected. Not even in their wildest hopes. The human ship responded. Immediately. Not with hesitation. Not with caution. Not with diplomatic questions. Not with fear. A single, powerful transmission lit up their screen. A calm, steady, warm voice said 5 simple words. Hold on. We're coming. Those words crushed the silence. Those words shattered the fear. Those words felt like a sun rising in a dead galaxy. Inside the alien ship, cries of relief filled the corridor. Some crying in disbelief, some kissing the frozen floor, some laughing for the first time in weeks. Children hugged their parents. The captain collapsed into his chair, tears streaming down his trembling cheeks. After weeks of darkness, someone heard them. Not their own empire, not their allies, not nearby colonies, not even passing ships, but humans, those strange beings from a distant blue world, those unpredictable warriors, those mysterious wanderers, had answered their call without hesitation. Outside, the human warship began moving toward them with slow, deliberate grace. Its engines glowed brighter, illuminating the void like a small star. Massive rescue lights activated, lighting the alien ship in a warm, golden glow that chased away the darkness surrounding it. For the first time in weeks, the alien crew could see the reflection of their own ship again, no longer swallowed by shadows. The human warship dwarfed them completely, towering hull plates, colossal thruster wings, reinforced shielding that shimmered like an energy storm. It looked like a guardian sent by the universe itself. As it approached, the whispers outside vanished instantly, cut off like someone snapping their fingers. Whatever hunted them fled. Whatever circled them disappeared. Whatever listened through the hull went silent. The darkness feared the human ship. The survivors watched in awe as the massive vessel extended docking arms, precise and steady, even in the fragile emptiness of deep void space. On the other end of the comms, human voices coordinated, calm and confident, as if deep space rescues were routine for them. And in that moment, every alien aboard the stranded ship understood something new. Something whispered across the stars, something every species had heard in rumors but never believed. When the galaxy turns its back on you, humans do not. Because in the coldest corner of the universe, in a place where the living were supposed to vanish, in a region even empires refused to enter, humanity came anyway. Not for glory, not for politics, not for reward, but simply because someone needed help, and humans could not ignore a call for help. Not now. Not ever. The alien ship drifted silently as the human warship came into full view, engines burning bright behind it like a promise of safety. Inside the lost vessel, every survivor leaned toward the windows, watching the human ship grow closer until it filled their entire vision, a wall of steel and light and strength. For the first time in weeks, they felt safe. For the first time in weeks, they felt hope. And when the human docking bridge finally locked onto their hull with deep metallic thud, every heart aboard the alien ship whispered the same truth. Humanity saved them. Not tomorrow, not later, not when convenient, but immediately. The moment the human warship locked its docking bridge onto the alien vessel, the entire corridor of the stranded ship trembled with a deep metallic hum that felt almost like a heartbeat returning after weeks of silence. And every survivor held their breath as warm golden light from the human side spilled through the cracks of the docking seal, pushing back the cold darkness that had been choking them for so long. The alien captain placed a trembling hand on the wall, whispering, "They came, they really came," while children rushed to their parents, clutching their arms as footsteps echoed faintly through the connecting tunnel. Slow, steady, confident footsteps that didn't belong to monsters or pirates or scavengers, but to humans. The survivors had heard many stories about humans. Reckless, fearless, emotional, unpredictable. But no one ever told them how it felt to hear a human rescue team approaching through the dark, their presence cutting through fear like the sun rising after the longest night. As the inner hatch finally hissed open, warm air flowed into the frozen corridor, and the first human stepped through. A tall figure in heavy armor, visor glowing blue, the kind of presence that made darkness shrink away without being told. The alien children hid behind their parents at first, eyes wide, hearts pounding, but the human soldier lowered their weapon, their voice soft and calm despite the danger around them as they said, "We're here to help. You're safe now." Those words broke whatever strength the adults had left. Several collapsed to their knees, sobbing from pure relief because no empire had come for them, no ally had responded, no nearby civilization had cared. But humans had crossed a dead star region without hesitation to save strangers they had never met. More human soldiers entered the ship, moving with smooth discipline, scanning for oxygen leaks, power failures, structural damage. One gently lifted a crying alien child into their arms, wrapping them in a warm emergency blanket and whispering comforting words the child couldn't even understand, but somehow still felt. Others helped the elderly walk, offering water packs, checking injuries, speaking with voices that carried steady assurance, even though the entire region outside was filled with dangers. Each human acted like this rescue wasn't a burden or a risk. It was their duty, their instinct, almost like helping was a part of their blood. The alien captain tried to stand tall, but his old legs trembled, so a human medic stepped forward and caught him before he fell, guiding him to a wall with a reassuring smile. "It's all right," she said softly. "You held on long enough. Now let us carry the weight." The captain's eyes filled with tears as he whispered. No one else answered. "Why did you?" The human medic paused for only a heartbeat, then replied with words that struck every survivor deeply. "Because no one deserves to die alone in the dark." And as the humans continued their rescue work, the alien crew noticed something strange happening. The whispers outside had stopped completely. Those shadowy sounds that haunted the hull for weeks were gone, vanished, like predators fleeing from a stronger beast. The survivors felt it too. The air seemed lighter, the cold less cruel, the darkness no longer pressing against the windows. One alien engineer asked nervously, "Are the creatures gone?" A human marine checked his scanner and nodded once. "They ran," he said simply. "They know better than to get close when a Terran warship is here." Fear turned into awe. It turned into gratitude. Gratitude turned into something deeper, trust. But the safety was not complete. The human sensors were picking up strange energy spikes scattered across the nearby starless region. Signals that suggested the void creatures hadn't fled far. They were gathering, watching, waiting to strike again. Admiral Cade Weston stood on the bridge of the human warship Titan 09. His expression carved from steel as he watched the ghostly energy signatures dance across his holographic display, like dozens of eyes staring from the shadows. "They're closing in," Orin, the ship's AI, warned in a low voice. "Estimate, 20 minutes before contact." Cade didn't hesitate. Get the survivors aboard. Now. He didn't care how dangerous it was. He didn't care how far the creatures would go. He didn't care about the rules of deep void travel or protocol or risk level. Strangers needed help. That was all that mattered. Inside the alien ship, the survivors were being guided through the docking tunnel one group at a time. Children first, elderly next, families afterward. Danny, the human marine leading the rescue team, lifted a small alien girl into her arms, the child clinging to her neck and whispering, "Please don't leave us." Danny hugged her gently and said, "I didn't come all this way to leave you behind. Okay?" The girl nodded, burying her head against the armor. But the corridor suddenly shook again. Just a little, but enough to silence everyone in an instant. The whispers returned. Faint, cold, hungry. The alien captain stiffened, fear flooding back into his eyes. "They're still here," he whispered. Danny tightened her grip on her rifle. "Let them come," she said. "Humans don't run." She spoke bravely, but even she felt something changing in the air. Like the darkness itself was growing thicker outside, curling around their ship, preparing to strike. The human warship's engines hummed louder, its shields flaring as the creatures in the void began to stir again, sensing their prey slipping away. But the humans stood firm, forming a protective line in the corridor, surrounding the remaining survivors. One human voice came through every speaker of both ships, strong and commanding, the voice of Admiral Weston himself. As the last of the children were being carried through the docking tunnel, the darkness outside shifted like a living ocean waking from a long sleep, and every sensor on both ships began screaming in panic as cold waves of unknown energy pulsed through the hull, making the lights flicker and the metal groan like it was being crushed by an invisible fist. And the survivors felt the same icy whisper they had prayed to never hear again sliding down their spines. Those same whispers that had followed them through deep space, hunting them, circling them, feeding on their fear. The small alien girl in Danny's arms buried her face deeper into the Marine's chest as Danny felt the temperature around them suddenly drop, her breath forming white fog inside her helmet while her heartbeat thundered painfully against her ribs. But she forced her voice to stay calm as she whispered, "Hold on to me. I'm not letting you go." Meanwhile, inside the human warship's command bridge, Admiral Weston stood rigid as the holographic map flared with dozens, then hundreds, of dark signatures surrounding both vessels like a massive ring of crawling shadows, each one pulsing with hostile intent, each one moving closer with slow, deliberate hunger. Oren's voice trembled for the first time. Void entities approaching. Estimated time to contact, 3 minutes. But Weston did not flinch. He stared at the screen with a cold fire in his eyes and replied, "Then we fight in 3 minutes." Back in the narrow alien hallway, the Marines began forming a defensive wall around the remaining survivors, their boots planted firmly, their rifles aimed into the dark as the whispers grew louder. No longer random echoes but voices speaking in ghostly patterns, words the aliens recognized from their nightmares, words that said, "We see you, we smell you, we want what you owe the dark." A terrified alien father dropped to his knees clutching his child, shaking so violently he couldn't stand. But a human soldier placed a firm hand on his shoulder, lifting him up with surprising gentleness, whispering, "Look at me. You're not dying today. I won't let you." Tears streamed down the alien's face as he whispered, Why are you helping us?" And the human answered with the kind of quiet certainty that could cut through any darkness. "Because we don't leave people behind." The whispers grew sharper, angrier, like knives scraping stone, and suddenly the entire alien ship jolted forward as something enormous slammed against the outside hull. The impact so violent that several survivors were knocked off their feet, and the docking tunnel groaned under pressure, warning lights flashing red as if the metal itself cried for help. Every child screamed. Humans immediately moved, scooping them up, shielding them with their armored bodies as Danny shouted, "Move! Move! Get them across!" Marines began rushing the last survivors through the connecting bridge toward the human warship, but the shadows outside slammed into the hull again, harder, making the tunnel twist slightly as if it might snap apart. On the Titan 09 bridge, Weston barked, "Activate external lights!" And a second later, massive floodlights ignited around the human warship, blasting the void with intense white beams that cut deep into the darkness like swords of sunlight. For a moment, everyone saw them. Creatures made of pure shadow, long and serpentine, bodies twisting like smoke and teeth glinting like shards of ice. The aliens screamed in horror. The humans tightened their formation, and the creatures hissed in agony under the sudden brightness, pulling back but only briefly before lunging again with renewed fury, smashing themselves at the human warship's shields, causing shockwaves that rattled every deck. Shields dropping to 92%, Oren warned, but Weston didn't move, didn't blink. He simply muttered, "Keep them off the tunnel." Danny and the Marines pushed forward, guiding the last group of survivors toward the human hatch. But the whispers suddenly shifted, turning sharper, colder, more focused, whispering the children's names, whispering their fears, their memories, whispering lies that sank into their small hearts like poison needles. A little boy stumbled, grabbing Danny's armor with shaking hands, whispering, "It's calling me. It's inside my head." Danny dropped to one knee, cupping his face with both hands as she whispered fiercely, "Listen to me. I'm right here. You look at me, not the dark." Tears streamed down the child's face as he nodded, and Danny lifted him into her arms again. pushing forward with renewed determination as another violent jolt rocked the ship, making the entire tunnel creak like it would rip apart. Marines braced, holding the structure with their bare hands as if willing it to stay together until the last survivor crossed. Humans weren't running. They were standing between the darkness and the helpless, refusing to move even when survival meant retreat. And then the creatures attacked again. This time not physically but emotionally, flooding the alien ship and docking corridor with a wave of psychic terror so strong that several survivors collapsed crying, clutching their heads, screaming as horrific visions filled their minds. Their homes burning, their families dying, their past failures mocking them. The Marines felt it too, sharp pain, cold fear forced into their brains, but humans were built differently. Where others broke, humans pushed back. Where others surrendered, humans fought the darkness inside themselves. Danny clenched her jaw, blood dripping from her nose as she forced herself to stay conscious, whispering through gritted teeth, "Stay behind us." Marines shouted to each other, pulling survivors up, dragging them forward, refusing to let anyone fall. The human warship deployed counterpsychic dampeners, sending pulses through the corridor that weakened the mental attack just enough for the Marines to keep moving. Finally, the last of the survivors crossed into the Titan 09. But just as the final Marine stepped onto the human ship, the creatures outside let out a deafening psychic scream that shook both vessels violently, causing the entire docking bridge to buckle and twist. "Seal the hatch," Danny yelled. "Now!" The hatch slammed shut with a thunderous clang just as the docking arms snapped away behind them, spinning into the void like a broken limb as the creatures swarmed it. Breathing hard, shaking, covered in sweat and fear, Danny leaned against the wall, clutching the child close as alarms echoed across the ship. Admiral Weston's voice boomed through the speakers. The moment the docking arms snapped away and the hatch sealed, a shockwave rippled through Titan 09 so violently that the lights across the corridor burst into sparks, throwing white flashes across terrified faces as survivors clung to the walls and Marines spread out protectively around them. The entire warship shook like something enormous had grabbed it from the outside, twisting the metal frame with inhuman strength, and Admiral Weston felt the deck rumble beneath his boots as the void creatures slammed into the ship's shields with bone-crushing fury, their dark forms swirling like a black storm made of claws, screams, and endless hunger. Inside the refugee bay, the rescued aliens screamed as psychic pressure punched through the walls like icy knives stabbing straight into their minds, bringing back childhood terrors, lost memories, old failures, and every lonely thought they tried to bury, and many fell to their knees crying, shaking, unable to breathe. The Marines felt it too, sharp stabbing pain behind their eyes, pounding headaches, voices whispering in their heads, but they forced themselves to stand tall, forming a circle around the survivors, their armor trembling under the emotional assault while they shouted commands through gritted teeth. "Stay together. Don't listen to it." Danny held the small alien boy tightly as he trembled uncontrollably, his tiny hands gripping her armor like his life depended on it. His voice broken as he sobbed, "It's calling me. It wants me. I can hear it." But Danny cupped his head with both hands, forcing him to look at her through the tears as she whispered fiercely, "No, look at me. You are safe. I won't let anyone take you. Not while I'm breathing." Her voice cracked with emotion, but she didn't look away, didn't blink, didn't break. The creatures outside struck the hull again, harder this time, and the warship lurched sideways as if kicked by a planet-sized fist, sending Marines and survivors sliding across the deck. On the bridge, Admiral Weston grabbed the railing with both hands as alarms blared in every direction, red lights spinning wildly around him while Orin announced, "Shields at 70% and falling. Creatures attempting structural breach. Multiple contact points forming." Weston's voice boomed in response, "Redirect power to the barrier. Do not let them enter this ship." Engineers scrambled, rerouting energy lines, pushing reactors into unsafe levels while the ship's engines growled like angry beasts, trying to keep Titan 09 stable as the void creatures swarmed it like locusts tearing at a dying field. But the enemy wasn't only attacking physically, it was assaulting the survivors' minds. The psychic pressure inside the bay grew so intense that several aliens curled into balls on the floor, shaking violently, whispering the same 3 words over and over. Make it stop. Make it stop. Danny felt every whisper like a punch in the chest, but she forced herself to stay strong, kneeling among them, pulling them tightly into her arms as she whispered, "You're not alone. You're not alone. Focus on my voice." But the darkness pushed harder, trying to claw inside her thoughts too, whispering lies in her mind. "You will fail. They will die. You cannot save them. You're too late." And for a moment she felt her strength wobble as her hands trembled against her will. The psychic weight pressed harder and harder, draining her breath, squeezing her chest, filling her mind with suffocating terror. But just before she collapsed, the small boy lifted his head, tears shining in his wide eyes as he whispered shakily, "Don't stop, please. You saved us. You can do it." And that single fragile voice, trembling yet filled with belief, broke the psychic hold like shattering glass. Danny inhaled sharply, like she had just burst out of water after drowning, and she screamed across the bay, "Stand up! Humans don't fall to shadows." The Marines reacted instantly, their spirits reignited by her defiant roar. They slammed their boots down, raised their weapons, widened their stance, and formed a shield around the survivors so tight and solid that even the darkness seemed to hesitate. The creatures struck the hull again, a violent impact that nearly ripped the floor from under them, and Oren warned, "Shields at 50%, internal hull stress rising." Creatures attempting to pierce the lower deck armor. Weston clenched his jaw, heart pounding with the weight of thousands of lives resting on a single decision, and he shouted, "Deploy internal counterlight. Every deck." Instantly, bright pulses of white-blue energy burst through the ship's corridors, flooding every compartment with artificial sunlight designed to weaken psychic entities. The survivors gasped as warm light washed over them, burning away the icy whispers clawing at their minds, while the Marines straightened, shoulders rising as strength returned to their bodies. Outside, the void creatures shrieked, high-pitched, unnatural, furious, as the light cut through their shadowy forms, forcing them to recoil like smoke burned by fire. But the victory was small, too small. The creatures regrouped instantly, swirling into a massive spiral of darkness that wrapped around the warship like a constricting serpent, compressing the shields tighter and tighter until the entire ship groaned like a dying titan. Danny felt the floor vibrate with every impact while the small children clung to her trembling like leaves in a storm, and she held them close, whispering over and over, "It's okay. You're safe, humanity's here." But deep down she knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The creatures wanted the survivors back. The creatures wanted the ship. The creatures wanted to claim the humans who dared protect strangers. And judging by the way the entire hull shuddered under the assault, they were willing to tear the Titan 09 apart piece by piece to get them. The Titan 09 groaned like a wounded beast as the shadow creatures tightened their grip around the hull, crushing the metal with enough force to bend reinforced armor plates, and every deck shuddered as if the ship was being dragged toward some unseen abyss. But inside the refugee bay the humans refused to show fear even though their hearts pounded like drums. Inside their armor, survivors huddled together, trembling violently as psychic pressure seeped into the walls like cold smoke, whispering nightmares into their ears, showing them twisted visions of their homes burning, their loved ones screaming, themselves floating lifeless in the dark, and many collapsed sobbing while others begged for the voices to stop. Danny felt the whispers stabbing into her skull too, her breaths growing sharp, her vision blurring as the creature pressed deeper into her memories, showing her every moment she had ever failed someone, whispering that she would fail again, whispering that the children behind her would die because of her. But she clenched her fists, forcing herself to stay upright, forcing her body to obey even as tears streamed down her face. "You don't get to break me," she whispered under her breath, her voice cracking as she pulled a shaking child closer, setting him behind her legs to shield him with her own body. Another violent impact rocked the ship and a row of ceiling panels crashed to the floor, sending debris and sparks everywhere as the alien survivors screamed, and human Marines instantly formed a wider defensive circle, raising energy shields to block falling metal while shouting for everyone to stay low. The lights flickered again, once, twice, then dimmed to a sickly orange glow, and Oren's voice echoed through the speakers. Warning. Main shield capacitor breached. Hull integrity destabilizing. Creatures are attempting coordinated penetration. Admiral Weston slammed his fist against the railing on the bridge, fury blazing behind his eyes as he barked. Keep the shields up. Divert power from weapons if you have to. Protect the civilians at all costs. Engineers rushed like lightning, sweat pouring down their faces as they forced overloaded reactors to keep pumping energy into the barrier. Metal floors vibrating under their feet as the ship screamed under the pressure. But the shadow creatures outside weren't just attacking. They were learning. They changed shape, merging into a single massive entity. A colossal sphere of swirling darkness that wrapped itself around the entire warship, blocking every escape path, every sensor, every channel of light. And when it struck the shields again, it did so with concentrated psychic force that made even Weston stumble backward as a wave of despair slammed into the bridge like a tidal wave. "It's inside!" one officer choked out, dropping to his knees as tears spilled uncontrollably down his cheeks. "It's inside my head." Oren's glowing eyes flickered rapidly, his voice trembling. "Admiral, the entity is projecting a mass fear field. Crew morale dropping. Survivors at critical emotional stress." Back in the refugee bay, the screams grew louder, rawer, more desperate as the psychic assault peaked. Several aliens clutched their heads, wailing in agony, begging for mercy from voices that did not exist. A mother collapsed, gasping frantically as she felt the darkness claw into her mind, whispering visions of losing her children forever. Danny ran to her, grabbing her shoulders, forcing her to look into her visor as she shook her gently and said, Hey, look at me. You're here. You're alive. That thing outside can't take you." But the woman sobbed, I can't stop hearing it. It wants my children. It wants them." Danny's throat tightened painfully as she whispered back, "Then it will have to go through us first." Another impact hit the hull, this time so massive that entire decks shook violently, throwing soldiers, civilians, even heavy equipment across the bay. A support beam snapped with a thunderous crack, toppling toward a group of alien children. Danny sprinted with no hesitation, diving forward and shielding them with her own body as the beam slammed onto her back, her armor screeching under the hit. She screamed in pain but held her position, refusing to move even as her spine burned with agony, and two Marines rushed in, lifting the beam off her while gasping at her injuries. She pushed them away, panting, "I'm fine, help the others?" Even though her legs almost buckled under her, the children hugged her, crying into her armor as she held them tight, whispering, "I'm not letting anything hurt you." Humanity was breaking but not falling. Admiral Weston wiped blood from his forehead, eyes burning as he shouted, "Oren, we need to push the entity back. Give me options." Oren hesitated, then spoke with a quiet urgency. "There is one option, but it is dangerous. We can ignite the ship's full radiation shield at once. A pulse like that would blind the creatures temporarily, but it could also destabilize internal systems." Weston didn't think twice. "Do it." Oren's warning tone echoed. "This could cause severe internal tremors." "Do it," Weston roared. The ship answered. A blinding burst of white-blue radiation erupted across the hull, slicing through the darkness like a supernova. The shadow creatures shrieked, pulling away rapidly as if burned, swirling chaotically around the warship in confusion. The psychic pressure vanished like a candle blown out in a storm. Inside, survivors gasped in relief as their minds cleared. Some fainted, others cried. Some simply dropped to the floor shaking, but they were no longer drowning in fear. Danny felt her breath return, and she rested her forehead against the small boy's, whispering, "See, we're not done yet." But relief lasted only seconds. Oren's voice returned, urgent and shaken. "Admiral, the entity is retreating to form a larger shape. It is not withdrawing. It is preparing something much stronger." A chill ran through Weston's chest. Danny's stomach twisted. The survivors felt the air grow cold again. The darkness outside began condensing into one massive form, far larger than anything they had seen before. The real fight was only beginning. The moment Oren announced that the entity was reforming, A cold silence filled Titan-09, as if the entire warship was holding its breath, before a deep, low vibration rolled through the hull, shaking the metal frame with such power that even the reinforced corridors groaned like a dying giant, and everyone aboard felt an invisible weight settle on their chests, heavy, suffocating, crushing, as if the darkness itself was pressing its hands around their hearts. Outside the ship, the swirling shadow storm began pulling itself inward, condensing, compacting, gathering into a single enormous shape so massive it blotted out what little starlight remained, taking the form of a colossal black sphere bigger than Titan-09 itself. Pulsing, throbbing, alive. The survivors inside the refugee bay felt the temperature drop instantly, frost forming along the walls as the psychic presence of the creature slammed into them like a tidal wave, and many alien parents fell to their knees screaming, clutching their heads as the entity flooded their minds with visions of death, isolation, abandonment, forcing them to relive the moment they thought no rescue would come. The children huddled together crying uncontrollably, their voices trembling with pure terror as they buried their faces in Danny's armor, and Danny wrapped her arms around as many as she could, whispering, "I'm here, I'm here. Don't look outside." Even though she herself felt like she was drowning under a sea of invisible knives stabbing into her consciousness. One little girl sobbed, "Make it stop! Make it stop, please!" And Danny's heart cracked in two, anger and sorrow burning behind her eyes as she fought to keep her breath steady, while waves of psychic despair washed over her again and again, trying to push her into the same darkness she was protecting the children from. Marines around her braced against the wall, teeth gritted, hands trembling as the voices clawed into their minds. Voices telling them they were too weak, too late, too small to face such a monster. Voices twisting into the sounds of their lost loved ones calling from the void, begging for help that never came. Several Marines collapsed, gasping, blood dripping from their noses. But none of them left their positions around the survivors because even when the universe tried to break them, humans simply refused to move. On the bridge, Admiral Weston clenched the railing so tightly that blood seeped from his palms, eyes locked on the massive black sphere outside as it expanded and contracted like a breathing heart of darkness. Oren's voice shook with static. "Admiral, the creature is generating a gravitational singularity. If it completes the process, it will crush the ship like paper." Weston's heartbeat thundered in his ears. "What's the time?" 2 minutes, maybe less." Weston turned to his officers, voice hoarse but unwavering. "We're not dying like this. Prep the starburst cannons." Every officer's face drained of color. The starburst cannons were a last resort weapon, dangerous, unstable, capable of causing massive internal backlash if misfired, but Weston gave no room for argument. "Do it," he growled. Back in the refugee bay, another violent tremor knocked everyone sideways, throwing survivors and Marines alike across the deck. Danny slammed against the wall, pain shooting up her arm, but she forced herself up instantly, pulling a crying child into her arms as she shouted over the psychic noise, "Stay with me! Don't let go!" The darkness outside crackled with lightning, black lightning, electric arcs of pure void energy that wrapped around the sphere like chains as the creature continued consuming light, space, gravity itself. A loud, sickening creak echoed down the corridor as the warship's hull bent inward under the pressure, and Oren's voice came through the speakers again, filled with alarm. "Hull integrity at 70%, gravity distortion increasing, structural collapse imminent." The survivors screamed. Danny held the children tighter, closing her eyes for 1 second. Not in fear, but in prayer. Praying that somehow, somewhere, humanity still had one more miracle left. "Danny?" a Marine whispered, voice shaking. "If this thing hits us, we won't even have bodies left." Danny turned to him with fire in her eyes and whispered, "Then we die standing, not running." Another scream tore through the ship as the sphere outside expanded suddenly, sending a pulse of psychic force through the hull that knocked out several lights and blew open storage panels, scattering equipment everywhere. Children tumbled to the floor, howling in terror. Marines rushed to shield them, forming a human barricade with their bodies. The darkness outside pulsed again, faster, louder, angrier. It knew the humans were resisting. It hated that the humans were resisting. It wanted to break them, crush them, swallow them whole. And then it spoke. Not through sound, not through speakers, but inside every mind aboard Titan 09. A single unified voice made of countless lost screams whispering the same message. Give them back. The survivors collapsed instantly, hands over their ears even though the voice wasn't physical, crying out in agony. Several Marines fell to the floor convulsing. Danny felt the voice stab into her skull like a spear, forcing her onto one knee as she screamed through clenched teeth. "No, you're not taking anyone." The shadow sphere reacted violently to her defiance, slamming its full force into the warship like a planet-sized hammer. The hull screamed, decks buckled, pipes burst, sparks rained from the ceiling. Orange shouted over the chaos, "Admiral, we're losing the ship." Weston's voice roared back, "Fire the cannons now." Outside, Titan 09's entire lower deck glowed with impossible light as the starburst cannons activated, charging energy that bent the darkness itself, and the sphere paused, just for a fraction of a second, as if surprised by humanity's refusal to die quietly. Then, like a star exploding, the cannons fired. A beam of pure white gold light shot from the ship straight into the heart of the darkness, piercing it, tearing a hole through the monstrous sphere. The creature shrieked, louder than anything the survivors had ever heard, as its body cracked and split like shattered glass. But the light wasn't enough. Not yet, because even wounded, the creature began pulling itself back together, fury rising like a tidal wave. Danny held onto the children as the gravity field twisted again, dragging them toward the wall with crushing force as the creature prepared a counterattack so powerful it could erase the ship in one blow. Humanity had landed its first real strike, but the shadow was ready to strike back. The creature's wounded scream had barely faded when the darkness outside began twisting again, gathering itself into a towering storm of shadows as raw hatred pulsed from its core like waves of black fire, and Titan 09 trembled beneath the crushing pressure, the metal frame bending and groaning as if begging for mercy. Inside the refugee bay, the survivors felt gravity shift violently, dragging them sideways across the floor as if the ship were falling into a black hole, and Marines threw themselves across the floor, grabbing children, forming human shields as debris flew past them like deadly shards. Danny clung to the small boy she'd been protecting, feeling the world tilt and shake beneath her, her armor scraping against the metal as she pushed herself between the children and the collapsing corridor, her breath ragged, her hands shaking but refusing to let go. "Hold on!" she shouted, voice cracking under the strain as the psychic pressure slammed into them once more, harder, sharper, trying to crush their will to fight, forcing memories into their minds that didn't belong to them, visions of the creature devouring entire civilizations, wiping out fleets, swallowing suns. Flashing images designed to break every heart aboard. Some survivors collapsed instantly, crying and shaking uncontrollably, overwhelmed by terror. Others curled up, covering their ears though the sound was inside them. Even the Marines, battle-hardened, disciplined, felt their resolve cracking under the monster's final assault. One Marine screamed as the psychic attack showed him his brother dying in a battle that happened years before, whispering, "It wasn't your fault," in the creature's voice, twisting comfort into torture. Another Marine slammed his fist into the wall, fighting the hallucinations with raw stubbornness. Danny felt her own mind slipping as the creature dug into her memories, dragging up the moment she lost her squad years ago, showing her their dead faces, whispering, "You couldn't save them. You won't save these children either." Her breath hitched, her vision blurred, her strength faltered. But then, she felt tiny fingers clutching her armor, shaking, scared, desperate. The small boy looked up at her through tears and whispered, "Please, don't stop, we need you." And that was enough. A single plea, a single trembling voice, a single spark of hope. Danny gritted her teeth, forcing herself upright as she wrapped her arms around the children, voice breaking as she shouted, "Stay awake! Stay with me! Don't let it inside!" Her voice wasn't loud, but it was human. It was real. It was alive. And the creature hated it. Outside, the shadow sphere froze, as if startled by the emotional spike inside the ship. Admiral Weston saw the brief hesitation on the tactical display and seized it instantly. Orin, charge the cannons again. Overload them if you have to. Orin replied, static buzzing in its voice. Overloading will damage our own hull. Do it anyway, Weston roared, slamming a fist onto the console as officers around him struggled to stay on their feet, while the ship rocked violently under the creature's growing gravity field. The starburst cannons began charging, glowing brighter than before, but the creature sensed the danger and pulled the ship toward itself like a captured moon. Gravity twisting so fiercely that walls bulged inward, alarms wailed, and several decks went dark. In the refugee bay, weight increased so suddenly that bodies were forced to the ground. Children screamed as they were pinned, Marines groaned as their armor dug into the metal floor. Danny's bones felt like they would snap under the crushing force, yet she still pulled the children tighter under her arms, her voice a raw whisper as she said, "Not letting go?" The creature pressed harder, its sphere growing claws of shadow that extended toward Titan 09, ready to tear it open like a shell, and the psychic voice returned, louder, deeper, angrier than ever, echoing in every mind aboard. "Give them back," the survivors cried. Several Marines screamed. Even Admiral Weston felt his vision blur as the words pounded his skull. But then something happened the creature did not expect. The children, shaking, terrified, began reaching out for each other, holding hands tightly, forming a chain just like Danny had taught them earlier. One by one, every small trembling child held onto another until a circle formed. A fragile, shaking, innocent circle of pure hope. The emotional resonance spiked instantly. So bright, so warm, so painfully sincere that the psychic field inside the ship flickered like a dying flame. Danny felt the shift first. The weight on her chest lessened. The voices stopped for a moment. The air warmed slightly. She looked at the circle of children, at their small hands gripping each other with everything they had left, and whispered, tears spilling down her face, "That's it. That's it. Don't let go." On the bridge, Orin gasped, "Admiral," internal emotional resonance rising. "It's destabilizing the creature's gravity field." Weston didn't hesitate. "Fire!" Titan 09 unleashed its second starburst blast. A beam far brighter, far stronger, far more desperate than the first. Straight into the creature's core. The impact shook the universe. The shadow sphere split open with a deafening psychic scream, cracks spiderwebbing across its massive body as pieces of darkness peeled away like burning paper. Danny and the Marines watched through the trembling windows as the monster's shape began collapsing, its own gravity imploding inward as the starburst cannons tore it apart. But even dying, it refused to let go. Darkness surged again, its last attack, racing toward Titan 09 like a tidal wave of pure hate. The children screamed. The survivors panicked. Marines braced for impact. Danny wrapped every child she could reach under her arms, crying out, "Hold on!" And then, everything went white. The creature's final attack collided with Titan 09's shields at the exact moment the cannons reached full overload, triggering a chain reaction powerful enough to rip open the void. The world shattered into blinding light and deafening silence, and Titan 09 vanished into the explosion. When the explosion swallowed Titan 09, the universe fell into absolute silence. No sound, no movement, no light, just a blinding flash that erased everything for a single terrifying moment, and inside that white void Danny felt herself floating, weightless and breathless, still clutching the children as if her hands were glued to their small trembling bodies. She couldn't see anything. Not the walls, not the Marines, not even her own arms. But she refused to loosen her grip, whispering broken words into the darkness. Stay with me, please." As tears floated off her cheeks like tiny crystals suspended in the empty air, she feared they were dead, that the explosion had ended everything, that humanity's desperate fight had ended with them wiped out in silence. But then, through the fading light, she felt something warm stroke across her armor. A vibration that wasn't pain, wasn't fear, but life. A heartbeat. A ship's heartbeat. Titan 09's heartbeat. The shockwave cleared, the light thinned, and Danny gasped when she saw the walls materializing around her again. Flickering, glitching, but real. Followed by collapsing panels, smoking conduits, emergency lights flickering weakly like candles fighting against wind. The ship had survived. Barely. The floor vibrated under her as gravity returned in stuttering ripples, dropping her gently onto scorched metal. The children tumbled into her lap crying, but alive, alive. Clinging to her with desperate sobs, burying their faces into her armor as she wrapped her arms around them and pressed her forehead against theirs, whispering, "I've got you. You're safe. I've got you." Even though her voice cracked with every word, Marines around her slowly rose, groaning, coughing, shaking, their armor scorched, their visors cracked but standing because that's what humans did. Admiral Weston staggered to his feet on the bridge, blood running down his forehead, smoke rising from flaming consoles as officers pulled themselves up with trembling arms, and he stared through the shattered forward screen at the space outside. The darkness was gone. The massive shadow creature that wrapped their ship, crushed them, drowned them in fear. It was completely gone, torn apart by the cannon overload and the emotional resonance of the children fighting to live. Only drifting trails of black dust remained, dissolving into harmless particles like ash floating through the void. Weston exhaled a breath he didn't know he had been holding, his voice trembling as he whispered, "We're alive." But his relief lasted only seconds, because the ship's alarms erupted in a violent scream, red lights flashing again as Orin's damaged voice struggled to speak through static. "Warning, reactor, unstable, compartments failing, evacuation required." The ship was dying. The survivors, hundreds of them, were trapped inside a collapsing warship with no docking arm, no time to launch escape pods, no external support, nothing but raw determination keeping them alive. Danny felt the deck shift violently below her as another explosion rocked the corridor, and she screamed at the Marines, "Move! We need to get these kids out." Marines snapped back to action, adrenaline overriding pain as they scooped up children, lifted injured aliens onto their backs, guided families with broken legs and shaking hands through the wrecked hallway. Smoke filled the air. Sparks fell like burning snow. Pipes burst, flooding sections of the deck with steam so hot it burned exposed skin. Alarms blared with each collapsing bulkhead. Yet humanity did not retreat, they advanced. Every Marine walked through hell carrying someone else. Danny limped forward holding two children, one in each arm, refusing to let either of them go even as fire licked the walls and the floor shook with each failing system. "We're almost there. Stay with me," she shouted through the smoke, even though she could barely see more than a few feet ahead. Admiral Weston coordinated the entire evacuation with a broken console, shouting orders to seal doors manually, reroute emergency power, stabilize failing reactors long enough for everyone to reach the hangar where the emergency shuttles waited. One of the alien fathers stumbled, collapsed, whispering, "Leave me, save the children." But Danny grabbed him under the arm, growling, "We don't leave anyone, ever." The survivors followed the glowing floor strips, some flickering, some completely dead, through narrow corridors that groaned under the pressure of the collapsing ship. Ceiling beams crashed, flames roared, bulkheads caved in. Twice, Marines threw themselves over children to shield them from falling metal, getting injured but never hesitating. Humanity bled, but kept moving. The ship was moments away from tearing apart when the hangar doors finally came into view. A massive chamber filled with smoke, fire, and two functional shuttles flickering under emergency lights. Marines rushed the survivors inside, strapping them in, calming their screams, giving them water, giving them hope. Danny stumbled in last, lungs burning, armor cracked open on one side, carrying a little girl who was barely conscious. The moment Danny stepped inside, the girl whispered weakly, "You saved us?" And Danny pressed her forehead against the child's hand, whispering through tears, "No, you all saved us." Admiral Weston made it into the hangar with the last group of officers, slamming the emergency launch button as the ship's hull split open behind them, flames erupting like a volcano exploding inside the structure. "Launch!" he ordered. The shuttles blasted out of the hangar bay just as Titan 09 finally tore itself in half, exploding into a brilliant light that illuminated the void like a dying star. The shockwave pushed the shuttles forward, rattling their frames, but they remained intact, protected by the last gift Titan 09 gave. Its final shield burst. Silence followed. Endless, peaceful silence. Survivors cried, hugging each other, shaking, thanking the universe, thanking the humans sitting beside them. Danny sat with the children piled around her, all clinging to her arms and armor, refusing to let go. An alien elder looked at her with tears running down her wrinkled cheeks and whispered, Why did you do this for us? Why sacrifice your ship? Why risk everything?" Danny's exhausted eyes softened as she looked at every survivor. The children, the parents, the wounded, the terrified, and she replied in a quiet, tired voice,